What is up, everyone, and welcome to episode number 73 of the CRM MVP podcast. For this episode, I'm actually not hosting, and I'm excited that the guys from Refresh the Cache finally brought in a portal expert into their show. Nicholas Hayduk is the host for the episode, and actually I asked the guys to talk about what they would do if they were in charge of portals, because portals has gone through a bunch of changes. If you've been listening to the show, we talked about licensing, we talked about capabilities and the ease of implementation and all of that before. It kind of sprinkled here and there. We never really got into portals per se. Maybe we should have a portals episode in the future to kind of talk about how portals for dummies, how regular people will use portals and companies, because a lot of people out there in companies that have no idea how they would even use a portal. But I'm telling you, like, almost every single company out there could benefit from a portal, and that's something that maybe I need to get together with Nick Hayduk and record. But anyway, the guys from Refresh the Cache were coming back from the holidays in 2019, and they decided to record their first episode and entertain this idea of what they would do if they were the PM for portals, the program manager for portals, and they had unlimited budget, unlimited time, and unlimited imagination to make portals better. So that is what this episode is about. So I'm going to let the guys take over from here. I bet they're going to tell you that this is their first episode of 2020, blah, blah, super. Actually, just listen to this.
It's our first episode of 2020.
See, I told you they were going to tell you it was the first episode. But anyway, here they are for the rest of the episode. Refresh the Cache with the Canadian MVPs.
We have a special guest with us today. Nicholas Hayduk from Regina has joined us. Another Canadian named Nick doing portals. This could be the All Canadian Portals podcast. Nick, do you want to introduce yourself for those who may not know who you are?
Sure. Yeah. So I appreciate you getting the pronunciation of my name right there. Don't call me Hayduk. That's bad news. But I'm Nick Hayduk. I'm with a company called Engineered Code, and we do focus on portals. So this is definitely my favorite of all the podcasts. I started my career off with ADX Studio, so that's kind of how I got into the portals business, and have been doing it kind of ever since about 2009, so over 10 years now.
Wow. And Nick you were on a podcast, I think a year and a half ago, but Colin wasn't on that one, so I think it's the first time the three of us are on together.
Yeah, I believe that's when we recorded on the floor at the Summit.
Yeah,
the UG Summit.
We've come a long way from handing the microphone around and Sheila being half asleep and everything.
So I just need to change my name to Nick, and then we're all set.
Perfect.
That's right.
Which spelling should I go with? Nicholas or Nick?
Or maybe name your offspring Nick. That's probably the least you could do.
That is so not happening.
Yeah, that could be a bit awkward. Anyways, getting back on track. So this is also, for those of you who have ever read comic books or watched TV, they have these crossover episodes now. I think they've done a few other kind of crossovers as well with different TV shows and stuff. You guys ever watch any of those or seen any of those?
Past,
yeah. So basically you have one show and then you kind of cross over with another one. So a few weeks ago, another MVP, you may or may not have heard his name before. His name is Gus Gonzalez, and he has a podcast as well, more focused on the Dynamics 365 side of things. He's had a few episodes out. I think he's had some success with that, and he kind of put out the challenge if he kind of put out the what if scenario. What if he was the PM for a particular Power Platform technology? And he kind of threw down the gauntlet, or kind of threw out the challenge, or kind of gave the suggestion saying, hey, if you were the PM of a particular technology area, what would you do? And it seemed like I think it's a pretty cool concept. And a few rules that we took him up on the challenge, and we thought, well, let's get Nick on as well, because we all have our ideas and our wish list items. And if we were the Powerapps program managers at Microsoft, what would we do? But I did want to mention as well, we're big fans of the program managers that are there. We had Dilip on last time. Sandeep and Yogesh that we talk to every so often as well. The great guys, very helpful, very receptive to our ideas and hearing our feedback. And we think they're doing a great job, and we're pretty excited the stuff that they're coming up with. But in our what if scenario, because we're in a place where we can kind of pretend things. We have an unlimited budget, and we're not under constraints from other forces telling us what to do. So it's basically as if we were given the job title of program manager for Powerapps portals, but we could do what we want. We're going to come up with some ideas. So I'm going to turn it over to Nick because he's our guest. And so, Nick, if you found out or you became the program manager for Powerapps portals, what's the first thing you would do?
All right, so I think the first thing I would do is I think there's some opportunities out there for some really quick wins. Everyone likes quick wins, and I think what I would do is I'd focus on a few things where with very minimal effort we could have some new features out there. So the one that immediately comes to mind for me is adding multi-select support to the portals.
Oh, okay.
Whether that's in Liquid. Because right now, if you have a multi-select attribute, it just doesn't even show up in Liquid, as well as support in entity forms, web forms, that sort of thing. I'd really love to see them add support for that, and I don't think it's really that much work. So that would be the first thing I'd do is kind of knock off some quick wins. The first one being multi-select support.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah,
definitely good. Colin, what would so you just with your promotion? What would you do?
Probably not as quick win as Nick has. I think one that we often have to deal with from a sales cycle perspective is the competitive analysis with other CMSs. And trying to push the portal as the product that people use and replace their other CMSs like WordPress or Drupal or Sitecore, of all of them out there. And the one thing that commonly hear about the portal is that it isn't a fully featured or full functional CMS. And I think when people think about that, it's really like the marketing content authoring department people that are kind of having that issue and losing functionality from their other CMSs that they may have been used to in the past. So I'm thinking specifically of things like web pages having history or versioning capabilities within them. So similar to the functionality that we have within knowledge articles, but also for web pages. Being able to roll back to a previous version. I think we all probably use WordPress and go through drafts of creating blog posts, and you can go back and see all of your edits and everything like that, but that capability doesn't exist in the portal.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was about to say when it works in WordPress, it's pretty cool when it works.
Yeah, that's true. And the more complicated CMSs out there, they have these complex publishing workflows. So when you're going after like these enterprise implementations, and you try to talk to them about portals, they have these complex publishing workflows. And so it's not just this matter of a draft web page and a published web page. It often has like a large approval life cycle through that. In the portal, it's really tough to do those type of things. I mean, yes, there is this publishing state entity, but you really can't add another publishing state there. It's really hard coded to those two states that are already there. So I think just full CMS functionality would be something that would allow it to compete at a whole another level with other CMSs out there.
Cool.
It's funny because almost the exact opposite is on my list. And I guess, I mean, obviously if we had unlimited budget, that would be great. And you kind of wave your magic wand and have a CMS. But I do find at this point, there's too many organizations who are trying to use it as an enterprise CMS, and it is not. So I'd hate to see, investment that gets us halfway there, which is no different than where we are right now. So why spend more time still not getting us there? So to me, it's either, you either got to make it an enterprise CMS, or you just kind of say outright, this is not an enterprise CMS. Don't even bother.
So ditch the CMS functionality entirely.
Well, I think what they have right now is kind of basic. It's good enough for most kind of portal cases, and this is a portal technology, not a CMS. In my view, so stop. I wouldn't invest a whole lot in a few more CMS features that still aren't going to get us to the point where it is an enterprise CMS. So.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I would take it one way or another. If you can't make it to the full CMS functionality, then maybe what's the point? You should figure out a better integration story with a real CMS.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I'm with you guys 100%. Like it's either go all the way or just stay where you're at with what you got.
Yeah.
All right. On my list, and one thing I think. We did chat about this before we started recording, is I think on all of our lists is the ability to do CRUD operations like create, read, update, without having to do it through an entity form or a web form, or that kind of stuff. And I know it's all on our list, but I know when we talked to Dilip 2 years ago and we poked him a little bit the last time as well, that I think that is something on the longer term roadmap from our understanding. But I think if I was put in charge, I'd probably, begin to funnel efforts and getting that sooner rather than later, because I think that opens a few more doors.
Yeah, he mentioned it so long ago, so I imagine it's somewhere out there, but hopefully we'll have it soon.
Yeah, I think saying that it would open a few doors is probably understating it. It would probably eliminate, at least from our perspective, a lot of the companion apps that we end up putting out there, because a lot of it's just interacting with the SDK. So that would hopefully eliminate the need to do any of that. Not that the companion apps are that complex. It's just an extra point of failure that we'd prefer not to have, and just make our life a lot easier.
Yeah, well, you take the complexity away of having to maintain other code in another location on another web service. That would make things a lot better, and I think make the story of managing it after we all leave these clients and them having the self-maintenance capability as well. So
I lost connectivity for like 10 seconds there. So I'm sure whatever was said was profound, and I'll re-listen to it later.
Very.
Whose turn is it anyway? I think we're back to Nick again.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
All right.
So I feel like I'm maybe stealing this from Colin, but because I'm first, I guess I get to do that. But what I'd like to see is support for Bootstrap version 4.
Oh, that wasn't even on my list, but yes, that's a great one.
It was on my list, but yeah, cool.
That is such a tough one for them to do, though.
My God. But that's exactly why they need to do it now, because the problems only get worse and worse and worse as as more people are picking up the platform. The problem's only going to get worse and worse. There's going to be more people who have to do that transition from version 3 to version 4. I think in an ideal world, when they had the new Powerapps portals, that would have been the perfect time to say, okay, this is the transition period, and then all these new people would have been on version 4. But yeah, we use Bootstrap 4 on projects that don't necessarily involve portals, and it's the extra features are great. So I think it's a Band-Aid that needs to get ripped off.
Yeah. So Nick, just for the benefit of the listeners who might not be fully knowledgeable about Bootstrap, can you kind of summarize the issue from moving to 3 to 4?
So the Bootstrap being the CSS framework, the responsive CSS framework that originated from Twitter. The move from 3 to 4 is that the CSS classes change. So if you were to take your CSS classes and apply them to the markup that you have on your current portal, it's just not going to look right. So it essentially means if you were to upgrade from 3 to 4, could mean a rewrite of the vast majority, if not all, of your markup for your portal. It would obviously mean a huge undertaking for the portals team, but I don't think that's the scary part. The scary part is all the custom work that's gone out there that the portals team doesn't have control over, and just all of a sudden applying Bootstrap 4 to that is going to lead to a lot of unhappy customers.
Oh, yeah. So it's not even like a version upgrade. It's more of a whole completely new version, like separate in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would take Nick's and go one step further. Like, let's just have a framework selector for a portal. Bootstrap's one of many frameworks out there. Microsoft even has their own. I've been using Office Fabric UI a lot on other portal sites that we develop that aren't the Powerapps portals. So, and I think that having a framework selector would actually make a way for people to make a transition from 3 to 4. Like, you can choose when to move from 3 to 4. So you can keep using 3, and new portals can use 4, or they can use other frameworks or whatever. But, like if we're going to change the framework or the underlying stuff and have to have a way of migrating people or having people on different versions using the same code base, we're going to need to have some way for them to select the framework and then go get the associated templates or resource files associated with it. So
it's definitely going to be a massive challenge, and it's something they're going to have to face like sooner or later. And like as Nick said, this is something they got to tackle sooner.
It's so hard for clients to go out and get a pre-built template on Bootstrap 3 nowadays. It used to be so easy, and that was what was so nice about the portals being on Bootstrap, was you could literally go, remember this site called wrapbootstrap.com. You could go on there and people would list their templates, and literally for like $10 or $15 you could buy a Bootstrap template that would completely change the look and feel of your Bootstrap implementation. And it made it so easy for companies to theme themselves really quickly. But I don't know how long 4's been out now. I want to say like 2 or 3 years, maybe. So the Bootstrap 3 templates don't exist really anymore. They're not as available, or they're not as maintained. And
So moving along, Colin, you're up on your second day in command. What's the next thing you would do?
Well, I think when I look at I love entity forms, and I think they're a core functionality to the portal. Obviously, it's one of the huge selling points past identity is that I can render CRM forms on the portal. Yeah. One of the things developers or implementers of the portal often have to do is add these JavaScript libraries that take entity forms to the next level or do really cool things. Both model-driven apps and Canvas apps have come up with this component framework, PCF, the Powerapps component framework, that allows you to basically build a control or a component and have it added to the form. And it can include a bunch of JavaScript, or you write it in TypeScript, and you can use React and various framework libraries as part of all of that. But it basically makes it really simple for people to add functionality to their model-driven forms or their Canvas applications with these rich components as part of all that. So I want to see those components also on the portal, because then I don't have to build, or as a client, I don't have to maintain all this custom code. It's just this component that I drop onto the form, and it just works. So
and these things build on each other too. So if you can get to a point where you can add PCF controls to portals, well, then you've almost addressed your first thing about being address some of the features that a full-fledged CMS has about kind of putting widgets and things on your portal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's definitely a good one. And you almost think they pretty much have to, because PCF is now a preview for Canvas apps. It's GA for model-driven apps. And if Power App portals are supposed to be that third Power App type, it kind of only stands to reason that PCF belongs there, even though it is the same but slightly different.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'd noticed that there was someone in the community that had kind of, hacked together an example of that actually working, where you could take a PCF control and add it to a portal. And so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that
again, it
was,
would be nice.
I was going to say that's AK in New Zealand.
Okay, that's who it was. Yeah.
Yeah, no, AK is a really good guy. We kind of a side note, he was the driver, took me and Rami out on, well, the three of us went on a wine tour, but he was designated driver. So AK is always going to be, one of my top people when traveling, because really appreciated that, because by the end of the day, me and Rami were in no shape to drive anywhere.
But I think what it probably ties back to is the CRUD SDK, that type of thing, because I think that's maybe the limiting factor on those other ones. You do have that connection. I think once they have that, if they have that API ready to go, then I think that might open the doors to PCF.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
You need that point to talk to do a lot of the functionality that the PCF controls do. So, yeah, I think AK's example is not it works in terms of using a lot of the same code, but I think if you were to get a little bit more complex and talk to like web APIs, then I'm not sure it continues working at that point. So
yeah, I think at that point all it was doing was updating. You can use it to replace a single input, and it could replace that single input, but it couldn't talk to anything other than updating the value of the input that already exists on the form.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just sort of kind of, I think from his perspective, it was a bit of a proof of concept in a situation. Well, can I do this and see if I can?
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to what I did a few weeks ago when I, triggered some Power Automate flows directly from a web page to update data. Like, yeah, it's doable. Do you want to do it in a project? Probably not. But it could build up to other things.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
So,
Nick, what's yours?
Well, you guys keep stealing mine, but
I knew that was going to happen this whole time.
yeah, no, but it's all good. I got every time there's a bunch more ideas I have here. One thing that I would do, and this is probably, and you guys may or may not agree with me on this one, but I would make the portal metadata solution aware. Now, there's probably a big hesitation to do that, because if you make, this is actually now making data solution aware, which is probably something Microsoft doesn't want to do. But I think from a portal perspective, if you're already moving, canvas and flows and other things within the solution context, why would you not make it available to move portal configurations through solutions as well? Now, I think the hesitation is because it's data. Would people use that same methodology to move like contact data or account data? And now I know we have environment variables as well, which is supposed to address some of that configuration stuff. But that is something that I would take a look at doing to make portal metadata solution aware, so you can move from a dev to a test to a dev to a prod, the same as you would move any other solution that has components.
Such a complicated thing. Do you replace the web page copy when you do a deployment to prod, or do you I think like the big issue that I see a lot of customers having is they go and update their prods directly, and then their test and dev like web page copy differs from what they have in prod. It's not like they're backporting or updating all the places. So it would need to be very granular to me.
Yeah, and that's what there's a gray area there. Like I think the line would have to be drawn between content and configuration. But as we know, that line's a little bit blurry. And that, again, that's probably why they don't want to do it, partially. But I mean, again, it's just sort of from an ALM perspective, you take person off the street, you train them up on Powerapps, and you say you got to build up a solution to move, have healthy ALM. And they said, great, what about all the portal config that I did? Oh, well, you got to do something different for portals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I had on my list easy to use ALM publishing tools.
It's on my list too.
Yeah.
Aha, so I stole yours.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about putting portal metadata. I don't know about putting, because it's not just portal metadata. It's going to turn into field service configuration and all of the other apps that are based upon like configuration data that you're serving. I'm not sure about that one. Like I would love it, but there's got to be a good reason why it's not been done yet, I would imagine, beyond just them not wanting it in solutions in general. So it adds a lot of complexity.
It's tough. I almost feel like we might see a data center in space before we see that.
Mark my words. All right, Nick, you're up.
All right, so I'm going to go back to my quick wins here. I think that something, at least for people who are kind of new, especially kind of more on the developer side, once they're getting in and looking at things like web forms, unfortunately, they still see a lot of things that don't actually mean anything anymore. So there's like some developer tabs in there where you can type in some event names that don't work anymore because we don't have access to the code anymore. So there's a few things like that I'd like them to kind of go through and say, okay, if this stuff doesn't work anymore, let's just get rid of it from the forms, like the model-driven forms. Just to keep things clean, keep things don't worry about, you don't have to document things, you don't have to say that they're not supported anymore. So I'd like to kind of see a once over pass of the whole system and getting rid of all of the features that aren't supported anymore now that we're in the new Microsoft world, the SaaS solution as opposed to the old ADX on-prem world.
Right. So you mean like things like in the web form steps where you can still pick user controls, but we can't use user controls.
Exactly.
No, I bet you can refer to the user controls that used to be in the ADX Studio products.
Yeah, they're probably still in there. Payment gateways, anyone?
Yeah, so if you know the old paths.
Well, you just have to still download the source code. You could still find some of those.
Yeah, they're all in there, that's for sure.
But I agree. It needs a scrubbing. Like there's even a lot of the forms weren't redone. They're still sort of based in the classic UI forms as well. Like yes, they've converted over to unified interface, but they could do with some refresh and reorganization. And then for that matter, some of the things like the drop downs to choose an entity, which is based like on a JavaScript web resource, like that, some of those things, or as PCF controls mature, could be fixed with PCF controls. Now I know that's not the focus. The focus is on the front end designer. And I think Colin and I, we've talked about this before, I think on the episode about cleaning up that model, that the portal management app with some of the newer model driven features.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot there. I think they're focusing on the new Portal Studio, and that's how they're going to do the cleanup, is that it won't be accessible stuff in Portal Studio versus it being done in the model-driven application. So, but yeah, I totally agree. It is definitely confusing to people when you can still select a user control, but they're like, how do I get my code in here type of thing. So
yeah, you do. I still get questions. You see it on Twitter every so often. You see folks in the community, they'll say, does anybody have any idea what this field does? Like, 3 sections in on an entity form.
Yeah.
So Colin, you're up to, I think we're up to 6 different things now. So
I've got a list of like 8 or 9 now.
Yeah, we can go over 10. We don't have to listen to Gus. So
I'm going to go to a controversial one. I'm going to go with licensing. I think like the licensing that they've recently come out with has been a bit of a headache and a struggle for people to understand, and kind of definitely different mindsets out there. But I was going and looking up Azure B2C licensing the other day and looked at the language Microsoft had on the Azure page and wondering why couldn't we just do this with the portal of this monthly active users, and it being billed based upon the number of monthly unique users that authenticate within a given calendar month. So if John comes and authenticates, 20 times over a month, he's one monthly active user versus in the scenario currently he would be 20 counts of logins. So I'd like to see like Azure type pricing or billing, I guess, is more of the mindsets for that. So I would work to try to find a way to see if that could be switched so that it was more of a consumption post-paid model rather than prepaid. Because I think right now you buy pre what you expect rather than post you use this is what it costs you. So finding a way to move to that post-paid type of model.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I think it goes even beyond portals, like Powerapps licensing in general, or licensing from Microsoft in general. I think we're in a cloud world. We use something, we should pay for it. I go and park at a parking spot. I use it. I pay for it. I'm done. I don't prepay parking. I don't prepay electricity. I don't prepay for my water bill. I based on my monthly usage, I kind of have a rough idea of how much I'm going to use. And if I'm using too much electricity, then maybe I'm going to look at making things more efficient, getting efficient licensing or efficient light bulbs and everything like that. I think operating a business, if you're operating cloud software, you would do the same thing and take a look at, what? Do we need all these fields? We're not using field service, then why should we have to pay for it? And now I totally agree. The licensing is confusing. And we had, Colin, you were there on last Friday. We had a Power Platform user group where we had Microsoft give a presentation on licensing. And I think about halfway through the presentation, I was about ready to text you saying, like, how do we stop this? Or how do we get out of this? Or was this a good idea? Just because there is so much confusion, just because it is complex. I think this licensing in general needs to be simple, and Microsoft still can make their money, and they probably be even more profitable if they can, because people are now. I'm afraid people are afraid to buy something because they think it's too expensive. Where in reality, if it was a consumption-based model, they probably would end up paying less than what they're charged up front.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how, it might work out different. It might screw people. It might work better for others. But yeah, licensing, it like Azure-based services. And maybe that's just because I use a lot of Azure services that I'm more impartial to that. But I think it would be.
Well, anytime I use Azure, it's fair. Like, I find it's pretty simple. I say I want to, whether it's even something simple like spinning up a VM, there's an Azure pricing calculator. I put in this much RAM, this much processing, blah, 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 and it spits out a number at me. And then even on a monthly basis, I can actually go in daily to see where my spend is at.
Yeah, but I think that's probably only half the problem is that you have control over all of that stuff. When you talk about a portal and people logging in, you don't necessarily have control over your spend. So I think that's, to me, one problem with the licensing is the cost, and the other problem is the uncertainty. And probably the uncertainty is the biggest problem that I'm seeing right now. I'm working with some ISVs that are, they need a portal solution, but they just can't. It's impossible for them to know what their customers are going to have in terms of user base. So are they going to come out? Everyone always assumes the worst. And so they go in there and say, well, I've got 100,000 users and they're going to log in a couple times a month. And all of a sudden their portal's costing them 6 figures. Well, that's crazy. Yeah. Is it realistic? No, probably not. But how do you, so to me, the problem with it is the uncertainty and the fact that even for our existing clients, I can't go in anywhere and see how many, what their figures are. So I can't even tell them what they're going to be in this new world. And I think just the counting of the logins is the tough part, because you can probably take an educated guess as to kind of monthly active users, but how many times they're going to log in? You have a support case that someone logs in 3 or 4 times to, and all of a sudden that's a $10 support case. That's an expensive system.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I I think the licensing, like as much as every time we record, we seem to have a licensing talk. And I think it just needs to be, and I think this is just going to evolve over time. But yeah, I agree. As a PM, I would do the same thing. I would kind of like, no, we need to fix this. And I think the ultimate across the whole board, if they can put the licensing strategy on one page, that's when they got it right. So people know what they're going to pay for, what they're going to get.
All right. On to Sunnier Skies.
On to Sunnier Skies, cooler stuff. So, one thing that I think, and this, I'm not sure if this could be a quick win or not. Because I don't understand some of the, obviously I don't know all the ins and outs and everything like that. But a question I do get a lot of, and again, this might actually kind of tie into that long-standing wish list of the CRUD capabilities, but activate business rules on like entity forms and entity lists, or no, at least on entity forms. That's something I think that trips people up sometimes. They'll set up a client-side business rule. Of course, if it's server-side, it will still work. But some of those client-side business rules, like to hide and show fields and make things required or not, they'll turn that on, and then they'll do a portal page with an entity form on it. And they're like, why aren't my business rules working on my portal page? Well, it's like, it just doesn't happen. And again, maybe I'm simplifying it. I think it would be a very quick win if business rules would work on portal pages.
Yeah, no, I had this one on my list too. Business rules, and I also had business process flows. That's, I think, quite a bit more complex, the business process flows. But I agree that the business rules are, it's essentially a fairly straightforward JavaScript engine. So maybe not as quick as some of the other ones, but a lot easier than Bootstrap 4, that's for sure.
Cool. Right, Nick, you're up.
Oh, I'm trying to think of which one do I want to do here. All right, let's say, if I was the PM for Powerapps portals, one of the things I would be focusing on is the learning, and specifically maybe coming out with a certification specific to Powerapps portals.
Oh, interesting.
I see all these other people taking these all fancy exams to get their nice badges. I don't have any of those badges because there's nothing for portals for me. So it makes me feel sad. So specifically just for me, I'd like to see those so that I could actually pass one of those courses.
I don't see why not. I mean, you are totally right. I mean, Portal is definitely like a knowledge area of its own domain that's completely different from the technology that's used for Canvas apps or model-driven apps. Yeah.
I mean, there's some content on Microsoft Learn now. It's pretty good content, I'd say. The authors of it, well, you never know with those authors, but.
Well, I heard it's getting redone, so maybe it will be better the second time around.
Okay. No, I'm just kidding. That content's actually great. And so, obviously that was a big first step to have some official training material from Microsoft, and I think that the next step after that is to have an actual course or an actual exam for that.
Exam. Yeah, no, that'd be good. That'd be cool.
Yeah, very good.
All right, so Colin, what's your next one?
Maybe I'll give a last one here. So developer again, because that's kind of my domain. And so there is this tool for the XRM toolbox in terms of editing the liquid templates and everything like that. That's really handy to use. What I would love to see is a way of getting it integrated with something like Visual Studio Code. So some sort of like extension that would allow me to have all of the liquid template hinting, maybe even some way of getting a way to do like dot notation of navigating the entity properties. If you've ever done like C# development and you actually build the XRM class that has all of the info about the entities in it, so you can do contact dot and then address one or whatever. That would be super handy and super useful. So if we could do that and have it integrate with like source control, so I could pull those files into my Git repo, that would be amazing.
That'd be cool. Yeah. So like within Visual Studio Code, like pull up a web template or other parts, work with it. Yeah. The whole IntelliSense, and then push it back to your portal. Then also source control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Visual Studio Code is like, I've been using it for like so many things beyond just code. It's great.
Yeah,
But
no,
that's
that
going to
actually-
be more of a niche space, I think, that's more focused to us. So when I become PM, it might not be as high a priority based on all the other things I find out. So.
Yeah, no, that actually ties into a couple things on my list. And so in order for that to be useful, we'd probably also need some APIs for the caching, because now that they're caching those entities essentially forever.
15-minute SLAs and stuff.
Yeah. We'd need some sort of if we were developing those tools, you'd need to have an API to say, hey, invalidate the cache for that specific entity. And along those same lines, I used to do a lot of work on a platform called Adobe Business Catalyst, which also implemented Liquid. And one of the things I really loved about that platform is that you could, if you had an object in Liquid, you could output all of its properties. So you could actually see all the things that were available. I forget the command, but basically there was a filter that you could put in Liquid, and it would just output the whole object. Because we do get that question a lot. What's available? What are the properties? What's the name of this thing on that particular on a particular entity? How do I get to related entities? All that sort of stuff. And with that, you could see it just there. You could output it, and you'd have access to all of that. Which is there's really nowhere to see for the contact entity other than if you're looking at the metadata. What are all the options that I have available to me?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So Colin, you said you were done with your 4, right? Or
just trying to think with others, but yeah, I think
I
my list it mostly.
Yeah, I think if we come up with an even dozen, there might be a few little quick points after. So my last one for me, I would probably go in and completely revamp the web form. Not so much revamp web forms, but revamp the web form editing experience, or build an actual web form editing experience beyond what's there now in the model-driven app. And again, this is the second episode. My shout out to our good buddy Jim Novak, who I did actually drop a design a long time ago and kind of talked him through it, and he was going to kind of build that out. But I just think that's sort of, I don't like working with web forms. I find they're a pain. But when they work, they tend to work really well. And then, they work, end users on the portal kind of like using them and get a lot of things done. But getting to that point where they're workable is a kind of a very tedious effort. So if there's a better editor for that to organize and plan it and diagnose issues, I think that'd be a really cool thing.
Yep.
Agreed.
Fully agree.
All right. So, Nick, I think you probably had about 4 as well, right?
I've had my share. Maybe I've got a couple more on my list here that I'll just mention. Yeah,
just some quick throw.
Some quick features. Editable grids. That would be nice if we could turn an entity list into an editable grid.
PCF would solve that.
Yep, that would solve that too. So maybe some more extensibility around the SharePoint integration. Right now, it's you kind of turn it on, and there's not too many options around there, especially around which document locations it's interacting with. So I'd like to see some more extensibility around the SharePoint integration. And then longer term, the elimination of any page templates that are rewrite type. I think that would be a nice goal to have. Where if they were to kind of move away from those, which we have almost no control over, if we could somehow move to a different model, that would be awesome as well.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
I'm surprised that one's not actually done mostly. Can't be many left, but yeah, that one.
Well, I guess it's the rewrite template plus all the other ones that don't even actually have templates, and they're just using the MVC framework, and there's not even web page records associated with them. All of those, if they could be moved into editable web templates, that would be great.
Yeah, so the forms and stuff, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any quick points, Colin, that we don't need to elaborate on, but you'd like to see?
I think we've touched on all of the ones that I had listed out here. So yeah, I think I would suggest everybody go check the ideas site and vote up these issues. So
the only other one that I would put on there, and I think I'm not even sure this might even be a thing. They just had the file field type that's part of CDS now. Still in preview. You can access it through a Canvas app. You can't even access it through a model-driven app yet, unless there is a PCF controller where you can do that. But I think that is something that if you can make that portal aware, there's a couple of use cases where I see that could be pretty handy for users. If, like, let's say you're filling out a job application, you can upload a resume or something. Like, yeah, you can do that with the SharePoint integration now, but this would be just a straight up file field type and make that portal aware. That'd be just something I'd like to see. And you never know, maybe it is going to be portal aware when it becomes GA. And the other thing I would do, I would probably look at this, and maybe they're looking this already. Have you guys looked at the .NET, the Blaze server?
Blazor.
The Blazor, yeah, that's cool stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I would, and again, I've just started doing some reading on that and some learning. But I'd probably investigate how can we use some of that technology, or are there ways we can take advantage of that within portal projects? And maybe you guys are already, 10 months ahead of me on this, but that'd be something I would begin to drill down into a little bit as a PM for portals.
Yeah, it's an interesting technology, something that wouldn't have been possible 10 years ago. But it's a very cool architecture. If people haven't read up on it, I strongly encourage you to look at it, because it's very interesting what they're doing with that Blazor stuff. Yeah,
and considering it's a Microsoft product or Microsoft technology, it would just kind of stand to reason. Cool. So no, I think we had more than 10. I think we had 12 plus a few other things that we would do as a PM for Powerapps portals. So I hope if people have other ideas as well, definitely submit them on the ideas site. And if you think it's really cool, to send us out a tweet or something like that and mention it to us, and if we like it, we'll be sure to vote it up as well. So just kind of taking a little bit look forward, Nick, I see that you've scheduled a portals call in the next week or two.
Yes. So as part of the MVP Advent calendar, which I know there's a lot of MVPs involved in that, my prize kind of got expanded into, now I'm going to be doing a monthly, essentially the portals community call. So it's an hour where we'll have different topics, talk about the latest news, training, whatever it is that the community is interested in hearing about. So I've got the first one scheduled for, I believe it's the 22nd, 22nd of January. And then, the plan is to keep doing that every month. So if that's of interest to anyone out there, please find out the details. You can find that on the Twitter, LinkedIn, all that sort of stuff, and register and join the call and ask questions and learn more about portals.
Oh, that's really cool. So it's kind of an ask me anything, or do you have a topic that you'd be talking on?
Yeah, so the first one, we're doing a topic on viewing and printing invoices on a portal. So it just really depends. I think what we might do is, we'll have some topics. There'll always be kind of the latest news, a news section. There'll probably be an opportunity to ask questions, and then we'll just let the community kind of vote on what they want. If they want a kind of a more formal topic than the next month, then we can vote on that and see what people want.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, that's very good.
Might just troll that a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
Colin, anything community-wise coming up? I think I know you're not in charge of it, but one of your guys are, and I know you sent me an email about it as well. As your Canal, who works on your team, is doing the global Power Platform Bootcamp. Do you know anything beyond that? Or wanna say something about it?
it's scheduled for February 15th, all across the world. So I think it's Power Platform, bootcamp.com. You can go and see if there's a location on there. We're trying to hold one here in Ottawa, so trying to work on that. I know there's a bunch of locations in Canada, a couple in the US, and a bunch more all everywhere else. So it's one day that everybody gets together at all these locations and basically has a full day of learning all on Power Platform related topics. So pretty cool. And then I think we have the next Ottawa UG early March.
Yeah.
Then I hear they're moving this business application summit thing around. So it's no longer in Anaheim, California, but I think Dallas, Texas is the
a month later. So of course it's a cascading effect because we were going to do the 365 Saturday in Toronto that same week. So and then Montreal on the Saturday. We've actually now moved it to the end of May because of MBAS moving. But I would say if anybody's in California, if I was living there, I'd be tempted to put on a 365 Saturday or a 365 Power Up event, because I hear all these Microsoft, Power Platform people already have flights and hotels booked. So take advantage of that.
Don't cancel. Come to our event.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, hopefully anybody that's booked flights can get them adjusted or.
Yeah. Well, I would not want to be. Thankfully I hadn't booked flights for that yet, or haven't really made the go no go decision yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely it's a really interesting situation of what's going to happen there.
Yeah. So May is becoming a busy time because I think there's also UG Focus in May, I want to say, in Colorado. Yeah. So yeah, May is going to be busy.
No shortage of events and conferences and things like that. And Nick, you're heading off to Barcelona. You're going to UG Summit there, right? In Extreme?
Yes, I'll be. I think I just got my 4th session approved there, so I'll be busy there for a few days, anyways. So yep, first time to Spain, so I'm looking forward to that.
Oh wow!
Giving portal sessions for all of them, or
all 4 portal sessions? Yep.
Awesome. Nice.
Cool. Yeah, and I think I mentioned last episode I'm off to Scottish Summit at the end of February. I'm actually going to be in Philly next week for the 365 Power Up there as well, and then a few other. We'll sort of see how the schedule pans out, where I'll end up for speaking events and things like that. But definitely no shortage. No matter where you are in the world, there's probably something within a direct flight away that's happening for learning opportunities.
Unless you're in Regina. If you're in Regina, nothing is a direct flight away.
Oh, and it's really cold there right now.
Yeah, so. It's at least one sled dog ride away.
Should do that. We should do an event right in the middle of February in Regina. That way,
even I won't be here for that.
Yeah, true that.
Cool. All right, guys. I think we'll wrap this up, and so we have our top 12 things that we would do if we were Powerapps Portals program managers. And so, hope you enjoyed the episode, and always remember to refresh the cache.